Hey guys, Zangetsu here, bringing you a review of GARO, Chapter of the Black Wolf, episode 16. Yes, episode 16. It's getting hard to remember because I did the two together, so I can't look at the videos because they're off by an episode, but I really didn't have that much to say for that, so I just mixed it with the one that I had more to say about. Anyway, getting off topic. In this episode, Koga goes to visit the priestess named Amon, who created the ring, the Mado ring Zardoba, in order to discuss things with him on a night during which horrors do not spawn. In doing so, he ends up playing a game of bar chess with him that could result in, if he loses, in losing 10 years of his life. So, this is a pretty interesting episode. It does a lot for the series. It's one of those episodes that actually introduces a lot of lore. Particularly, this gives us the origins of Zardoba, which I'm going to get into first because there's a lot of annoyances I have with, not with the episode, but just how much has changed since this episode came out and Zardoba's origins. It also introduces the second combat characters into this show, known as Makai priests, which can be either both male or female, unlike Makai knights who can only be male, and are somewhat support units, but can also be decent fighters. It just depends on how skilled they are. But they're particularly known for building Mado tools, such as Zardoba. And Priest Amon is probably one of the best priests we'll see in the series. The other being the character he kind of introduces in this episode, but we don't see yet, named Jabi, who will play a significant role in the later couple episodes in the final arc of the series. And will come back later in season 2. And also introduces a bunch of other things, particularly bar chess, which we will see a lot later. I'll get into bar chess too here after I talk about Zardoba. It's not nearly as important, but I'll talk about it. And also red sake, which is a drink that the Makai Knights drink a lot when they're enjoying themselves. And so, yeah, there introduces a lot. It's a pretty good episode. A lot of it's just talking since there's no actual Makai Knight battles. They do use some clips from the Taiga episode that shows the GARO armor, but otherwise it's just an episode where Koga chats with Priest Amon, and they go into various things, particularly getting the cure for Kaoru called a Veronkus fruit that can only be that can be used to purify people that have been bathed in the blood of horrors using a purification ritual. And so, yeah. And so it's basically just him and Amon, a man who knew his father, having a discussion about basically, what makes him a Makai Knight, the various events that have taken place, the fact that there's some really shady stuff going down in behind the scenes around Koga. And probably the most important thing being that the idea that the man Barago, who is supposedly, who was Taiga's student, and who I think is supposed to, who they kind of imply was Taiga's killer in the Taiga episode, is still alive, despite the fact that he had been injured pretty badly by Taiga, as Amon had found his Mado lighter, which had been not rusted nearly enough to be as old as Barago's death had been. But yeah, we do learn that he was the pupil of Taiga, and that Koga kind of knew him, kind of didn't. We get a lot of stuff about why Koga wants to rescue Kaoru, which is pretty good stuff. And we also once again find out that, you know, Amon wants to help Koga and such. Now, getting into Zaruba. The show here states that Amon built Zaruba for Taiga. That he had created Zaruba to be the Madol tool of Taiga, and he would be passed down from son to student, and so on and so forth. This will change radically, particularly for the anime. The TV show rarely does this, but for the anime, Zaruba is apparently hundreds of years old. Or even thousands of years old, since in the anime they like to imply that Zaruba came into being around the time that the GARO armor was created. Despite the fact that this show states otherwise, and is frustrating. And I get it. They wanted to have Zaruba in the anime just like how he's in every single season of the TV show. But it's kind of frustrating because clearly Zaruba is not nearly that old, especially when we get to see him be built in this episode. Yeah, that's one of those things that bothers me about the show. And the other is that they're clearly based on Shinto priests, like priests from like the Edo period that, like, you know, used purification charms and seals and do a lot of Buddhist, like, well, mystical Buddhist exorcism skills for their magic. We don't get a lot of it here, mostly just the bar chest stuff. But yeah, but like in the anime, they also don't call them priests, despite the fact that, like, the first, I mean, granted, the first season does take place during the Spanish Inquisition, like, but like there were still priests. Like that wasn't a thing that just was in Japan. They call them alchemists, and I hate that, especially because they're still, like, when I listen to the Japanese, they say Makaihoshi. They're still saying priests, but the dub says alchemist. They're still saying the word for priest in Japanese. But here they are priests, although they do, the dub here still says that they're the alchemists, which, fair enough, they probably do use alchemy as for their creations of Mado tools, which we'll get actually more about how they make Mado tools in season 2. Sorry, I don't know why I blanked there. Especially because season 2 is my favorite season of the whole series, but this one's a pretty decent season. Anyway. So yeah, they do that. And while they're doing so, they're also discussing, like, you know, like how Makai Knights, for them, the fight's never ending because horrors will always spawn as long as there are evil humans and such, and why Koga went against the law to protect, save Kaoru. And really, that's kind of just the episode. But, like, it's a fun episode, particularly because it shows how much Koga has grown as a character. Particularly the fact that he's no longer hiding his feelings for Kaoru, that he clearly cares about this woman. How much is really not shown here. We'll see more of that in season 2, unfortunately. Like, their romance is kind of slow, but I kind of expect that in Japanese fiction. So yeah. And once again, they also introduce Bar Chess, which is a game that Makai Knights can play. We'll later see it that it's also used as a training. This is a sort of training thing for younger Makai priests and knights. But here it's supposed to be that, like, only really strong knights and priests can play it. And it plays like regular chess, but the idea is when you put pieces in check, to determine who will take the piece is instead done by placing your will into the pieces, and then, like, it creates these warriors out of energy, and you fight with those warriors, and the one that wins, their piece stays, but the loser's piece is destroyed. And it's using silhouettes of Koga and Rei from the opening. It's clearly like the Koga and Rei that you see in the openings, but here Amon takes the place of Rei, since we don't see Rei this entire episode. And Koga just uses himself. But yeah, it's an interesting episode. There's a lot of exposition and it's kind of slow, but I like it for being a sort of a cooling down point between the really intense episode of the previous the previous couple episodes, and kind of giving us like not like a summary so much as kind of like these are the points we're going to be hitting when we get into the actual final story arc. And that's kind of the thing with Garo. They'll have little bits of story arc throughout the series, and the last like quarter or third will be like taking all those various story points and meshing them together to create a story arc. Season 2 will do this a little bit better than season 1. I think because of the fact that season 1 was kind of experimental in the fact that they weren't sure how they were going to do this. A lot of it was very much episodic instead of being serial. And season 3 will be very serial to the point where episodes like follow each other and will like there won't be like a huge time gap. Like sometimes it'll be like we just go into the next episode, like will take place right after. To its benefit and detriment, but we'll get to that when we get to season 3. We've got a while before we hit season 3. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot of exposition here, and I don't really want to go into every single bit of it. Especially because, like, for one, the Veronicas fruit stuff we'll be getting into in a couple of episodes when we get to trying to purify Kaoru. But otherwise, it's a good episode. I like Amon. He's fun, and he's got an interesting way of doing things that you don't see otherwise. And he's a great introduction to one of my favorite characters, Jabi, when we get to her. But yeah. Oh yeah, and this is also where we actually get a little bit of insight into Koga's childhood, since him and Jabi apparently used to play together when Taiga would come to visit Amon for stuff. And yeah. So yeah, it's a good episode. Not really much to talk about since there's no action in this, and we don't really get to talk about like Garo very much because he's not really in it. Yeah, so it's a good episode. Next episode will actually be more interesting than this one, I think. I mean, let's say that. It's not a bad episode, it's just there's not much for me to talk about, even though I apparently talked about 12 minutes, But yeah, so that was my review of episode 16. Come back for 17. Take care.